Elaine Thompson's hands trembled as she laid out the silverware, just the slightest quiver that no one would notice but her. She had spent the last 3 hours in the kitchen, preparing the meal as she always did, meticulously, patiently. Thanksgiving was her day, the one day a year she could still feel like a mother who mattered. But today was different. Elaine, 67, retired librarian, widow for 9 years, and mother to Michael, stood at the head of the table she had set. The chair at the head was hers, not because anyone had specifically given it to her, but because she had earned it. It was the seat of authority, of love, of all the sacrifices she'd made in her life for her son, for her family. She ran her hand over the tablecloth, smoothing out the wrinkles. The white linen, clean and crisp, with faint golden thread running through it, just like the turkey she had seasoned and roasted for hours. It was all perfect, all familiar. The cranberry sauce gleamed and the sweet potatoes were just the right shade of amber. The silver she polished earlier that day gleamed like a promise of peace. It had been years since a husband had passed, but the house still felt alive with his memory, and she would keep it that way. She didn't have much left in the world, but what she did have she held on to with pride. She had made her family's traditions her own after Harold's passing, with Thanksgiving being the centerpiece. Every year she cooked, she cleaned, she smiled through every tense conversation, and she made sure everyone felt welcome, loved, no matter how different the family had become over time. It was a ritual she could still hold on to. Her son, Michael, had always been the light of her life. She had poured everything into raising him, every ounce of energy, every prayer, every sacrifice. But now she wasn't sure who this man was sitting across from her at the table. A small ache began in her chest, but she quickly dismissed it. She wasn't going to let it ruin tonight. It wasn't the right time to think about the distance between them. Tonight was about the meal, the family, the last remaining thread of normal. Then the door opened. The sound of the latch clicking was followed by Michael's heavy footsteps. He entered with no greeting, no smile, just a sharpness in his stride that immediately told Elaine something wasn't right. His wife, Tracy, trailed behind him, her lips tight, a mask of politeness poorly covering the discomfort in her eyes. The 2 boys shuffled in after them, heads down, too focused on their devices to even look at their grandmother. Elaine stood from the table, her smile unwavering despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "You made it," she said, her voice soft, but there was a tinge of something, hope? Maybe a silent prayer that this time things might feel like they used to. Michael dropped his keys onto the entry table with an almost violent clatter. The sound echoed in the small hallway as though the sharpness of it had stabbed directly through her calm. Tracy murmured something inaudible, but Elaine was already focused on Michael's back. His posture was rigid, defensive. He was wearing that same expression she had seen so many times growing up, the one that said he didn't want to be here, didn't want to deal with her, and certainly didn't want to participate in this holiday charade. "We said we'd come when we could." "Traffic?" Michael's voice was flat, lacking any warmth. His eyes never left his phone. Elaine nodded, her smile not faltering. She wasn't going to start an argument, not now. Not when dinner was almost ready. "Dinner's almost ready," she repeated, her tone light. By 4 o'clock, everyone was seated at the table. 12 people, but somehow it felt like less. A hollow echo hung in the air. The chatter was faint, like background noise. The cousins were laughing, Tracy was speaking to her brother in low tones, and the children were absorbed in their iPads, ignoring the turkey in front of them. Everyone was present, but no one was truly there. And across from Elaine, Michael remained still, his eyes fixed on his phone, fingers tapping away. His face was set in a scowl, like he was mentally preparing for the moment when everything would fall apart, when he could unleash his dissatisfaction onto the family once again. Elaine cleared her throat softly, a small signal to get their attention. She wasn't sure why, but she felt it was important. Tonight could be the night they shared one simple meal together, just one moment without the bitterness. I just want to say thank you for being here, she began, her voice steady but a little softer than usual. I know things haven't been easy, and I know we don't always see eye to eye, but I appreciate you all being here. Her words hung in the air, a tentative plea for connection, a whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, the family could come together for this one night. But Michael didn't look up. He didn't even glance in her direction. "Can we skip the speeches?" he interrupted. His voice was sharp, cutting through her quiet words. "Some of us actually have lives." Elaine's smile tightened, but she refused to let the tension in the room pull her down. She wasn't going to raise her voice. Not today. Not for him. The room went quiet for a moment, and Elaine's eyes flicked toward the children. She glanced at Tracy, but her daughter-in-law avoided her gaze. The discomfort was palpable. "I just hope we can share one meal without someone being unkind," Elaine said, almost in a whisper. It wasn't meant as an accusation, but a simple wish, a hope. That was all it took. Michael pushed back his chair so forcefully that the legs screeched loudly against the floor. His eyes flashed with something that looked like rage, something raw and uncontrolled. He stood up abruptly, his fists clenched at his sides. "Unkind?" Michael spat, his voice louder now, filled with venom. "You're calling me unkind? In front of everyone?" He turned to Tracy, who was still sitting, unsure how to react, her eyes wide. "I show up, I bring my family, and I'm still not good enough? Every year you ruin everything. Every damn time." Elaine's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him win. "Please lower your voice, Michael," Elaine said, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't the place." "Always playing the victim, aren't you?" Michael yelled, pacing. "Always acting like you're the saint, the martyr of the family. Well, guess what? You're not. You ruin everything." Elaine's hands gripped the edge of the table. She took a deep breath. Her heart was racing now, but she didn't let it show. Not yet. And then, without warning, Michael moved toward her. He slapped her. The sound of it echoed in the room, sharp and sudden. Not loud, but so clear, a crack that split through the fabric of their family. Elaine's body jerked, her chair tipping slightly, but she didn't fall. Everyone froze. The children gasped. Tracy's eyes widened, but she didn't move. She didn't stop him. Elaine's cheek burned, but her eyes didn't fill with tears. Not this time. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Instead, she placed a hand on her cheek, pressing gently. The sting was nothing compared to the shock. And still, she didn't react. Not the way Michael thought she would. She stared at him, really stared at him. The boy she had cradled in her arms, the man she had defended from every hardship. The son who had just struck her down. And then, in a voice that was almost too calm, she spoke. "Thank you, Michael," she said. Her voice was quiet but sharp, as though cutting through the tension. "For making everything so clear." Michael blinked, his confusion evident in his eyes, but he didn't stay. He turned on his heel and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy and unsure. Elaine didn't follow. She didn't chase after him. Instead, she reached for the serving spoon, and without a word she scooped some mashed potatoes onto her plate. The room remained frozen, unsure of what to do next. Elaine took a small bite. Chewed. The food tasted just as it always did. Delicious. And for the first time in years, she smiled. A small, knowing smile. The silence that followed Michael's exit was deafening. Elaine sat at the table, her hand still resting gently on the side of her face. The burn from the slap had begun to deepen, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight of what had just happened. Her son had struck her, and for the first time in her life she wasn't the victim. She was something else. Something stronger. Tracy, too stunned to speak, finally got up from her seat. She reached for her purse, her lips tight in what looked like a mixture of embarrassment and regret. "I think we should go," she said softly, her eyes avoiding Elaine's. "Come on, boys." The two children, still clutching their iPads, followed their mother obediently. They didn't speak, didn't look up from their screens, and Elaine realized, almost too late, that this moment, this dinner, had already been ruined far before Michael's outburst. It wasn't just him. It was the entire family, the years of misunderstandings, resentments, and quiet neglect. The fracture had started long ago, but tonight it had bled into the open. Elaine looked at the empty chair across from her. She didn't care that Michael was gone. She didn't care that the room felt colder now, like the laughter had drained out with him. What mattered was that she had finally seen it. The truth. The raw, undeniable truth. She wasn't just a mother. She wasn't just a victim of her son's disrespect anymore. She was Elaine, a woman who had lived a life of quiet strength, and for the first time in years, she felt that strength rising up inside her. Her hands, which had trembled before, now moved with precision. She gathered the dishes from the table, clearing the remains of what was supposed to be a joyful family meal. The turkey carcass sat, hollow and picked clean, a symbol of everything she had given, only to be left with scraps. As she moved through the motions, Elaine noticed the bruising on her cheek in the reflection of the kitchen window. It wasn't huge, but it was unmistakable. The deep purple under her skin. The heat. The sting. She wasn't sure why it didn't hurt as much as she thought it would. Maybe because she had been carrying so many other bruises for years, emotional ones, invisible ones, that this felt almost like a release. A final one. The clock on the wall ticked, and the house, once full of clinking silverware and forced pleasantries, was now silent. The only sound was Elaine's steady breathing and the soft rustle of the paper towel she used to wipe her hands. It was then that she heard the doorbell, a soft, hesitant chime. Elaine didn't move at first. She didn't know if it was Tracy returning with an apology, or if it was Michael coming back to yell. She didn't care. But when the doorbell rang again, Elaine walked slowly toward the door. She wasn't sure what to expect, but when she opened it, she saw Lydia, her longtime friend and neighbor, standing there with a small pie in her hands. "Thought you could use this," Lydia said, her voice soft. She paused, her eyes scanning Elaine's face, then quickly darted away, as if she didn't want to acknowledge what was so obvious. Elaine's heart gave a little flutter, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she smiled, gently, this time without effort. "Thank you, Lydia. I could use the company more than the pie, though." Lydia nodded, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The moment she crossed the threshold, she could feel the tension in the air. It hung there like smoke, thick, almost choking, the weight of the evening's events too heavy to ignore. Elaine led Lydia to the living room where they sat together. Lydia didn't ask any questions at first. She simply placed the pie on the table between them and watched Elaine, her expression full of concern. "I heard what happened," Lydia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't expect—" She trailed off, shaking her head, unsure of what to say. Elaine didn't look at her. She couldn't. It was easier to keep her gaze steady on the pie, on the cracks in the crust, the way the cinnamon had hardened just slightly on top. "I've always been patient," Elaine said, her voice rough. "With Michael, with everyone. I've always been the one to forgive. To give second chances. But I can't anymore." She turned to Lydia, meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. "I think I've been waiting for him to change, but I was never the one who needed to change. It was him. And me? I've been standing still, waiting for him to come around." Lydia was silent, her eyes soft. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. She had been through her own battles, her own moments of realization, when things finally snapped. Elaine stood, walking over to the window. She didn't have to say anything more. She didn't have to explain how it felt to be slapped by your own child, not physically but emotionally. She didn't need to say how every year she had watched Michael drift further away, and now it was all too clear. He had taken her for granted. He had used her. And in the end she was just a means to an end. But now, she wasn't going to let that be the end. Elaine turned back to Lydia, her eyes steely. "It's time I make some changes." "For good?" Lydia nodded. "I think I understand. You've been strong for too long, but now you need to be strong for yourself." Elaine smiled. This time, it wasn't just the smile of a mother who was trying to hold it all together. It was the smile of a woman who was finally letting go, who was finally stepping into her own power. She walked over to the counter and picked up the phone, dialing the number of her lawyer, Vanessa Green. "Vanessa," she said, her voice clear, steady. "I'm ready to make some changes. I want to revise my will. Completely." Elaine's fingers hovered over the phone's keypad for a moment. She wasn't sure why she hesitated. Perhaps it was because the call she was about to make was one she'd never truly thought she would need to make. But today, after everything, there was no more room for hesitation. She took a deep breath and dialed the number she knew by heart. Vanessa Green, her trusted attorney, had been with her through countless life decisions. The two women shared a professional relationship, but over the years Elaine had come to view Vanessa as more of a confidant. It wasn't just about legal matters anymore. Vanessa understood the weight of Elaine's choices. The phone rang twice before Vanessa's voice answered, smooth and calm. "Elaine, it's good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" Vanessa's voice was warm, but there was an undercurrent of concern. Elaine stood in the quiet of the living room, her hand still pressed to her cheek. The sting from Michael's slap had faded, but what had replaced it wasn't pain. It was clarity. A deep, undeniable clarity. "I'm all right," Elaine said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind in her chest. "I've been thinking. I need to make some changes. Big changes. I want to revise my will." Vanessa's tone shifted, sharper now. "Elaine, what's going on? You've never spoken like this before." Elaine didn't have to explain. Vanessa knew. The two had spoken before about Michael, about the subtle ways he had started to take her for granted, to expect things from her without giving back. They had talked about his increasing demands, his entitlement. They had even discussed Elaine's will in passing, though she had always dismissed it as something for another time, another year. But now, after Thanksgiving, it was time. Time for a clean break. Time for Michael to see her, not as a mother to be controlled or manipulated, but as a woman who could take back her life. "I want to remove him," Elaine said firmly. "From everything. My will. My assets. Every account he has access to. I'm done. I don't care anymore about bloodlines or obligations. I've spent a lifetime giving him everything, and this is how he repays me?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Elaine could almost hear her mind working, the legal implications of what Elaine was saying. "Elaine, you're sure about this? You know that once we start, it's final. He won't have any claim to your estate, to anything that's yours anymore. This isn't just a revision. It's a severing." Elaine nodded, even though Vanessa couldn't see her. Her chest tightened, but she stood taller, feeling the weight of every word she had just said. "I'm sure," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm done? He slapped me. He used me for years. And now he will never be able to manipulate me again. Not in life, and certainly not in death. This is my decision, and I'm ready to move forward." Vanessa exhaled softly. "All right, Elaine. If you're ready, we'll proceed." I'll draft the documents and we'll start the process. I'll also have a protection clause added just in case he tries to contest it later. I want this to be ironclad. Elaine nodded again, though Vanessa couldn't see it. Thank you. I don't want him to have the option of coming back later. I don't want him trying to manipulate the situation, claiming that I was too emotional or that I changed my mind. No. This will be final. He's not part of my life anymore. He has no say. I want Lydia to be the executor of my will, not him. She's the one who's seen the truth, even when no one else could. Vanessa's voice softened. Understood. Lydia will be a strong choice. You've been through a lot, Elaine, and this is your time to take back control. Elaine's gaze drifted to the kitchen window where the last traces of daylight were fading. The quiet that followed Michael's departure still hung in the air, but it didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt like space. Space for her to breathe, to finally act on her own terms. I've waited too long to do this, Elaine said, her voice a mix of regret and relief. I thought I needed Michael's approval, his respect. But the truth is, I don't. I've built my life without him. I can continue to build my future without him too. The words were freeing, like a weight lifting off her chest. Elaine had lived most of her life trying to make others happy, trying to hold the family together. But now she realized she had to focus on herself. She wasn't responsible for Michael's happiness or his future. She was only responsible for her own. Elaine, I'll get the paperwork started immediately. You'll need to come in and sign everything, but we'll make sure everything is set up to protect you legally. And if you're sure, we'll make it airtight, no chance of contesting it. I'm sure, Elaine confirmed, standing straighter as if the finality of her decision gave her strength. Let's do it. No more looking back. Vanessa's voice softened again. I'll handle it, Elaine. You focus on what's next. I'll be in touch soon with the draft. Elaine hung up the phone, the silence settling back around her, but it didn't feel heavy this time. It felt like peace. As she stood in the living room, staring at the empty chair where Michael had sat just hours ago, Elaine realized something. For the first time in years, the house felt like hers again. She wasn't just cleaning up after everyone else anymore. She wasn't going to let Michael's selfishness stain her life any longer. This house, this life, this future, it was hers. With quiet resolve, Elaine walked over to the desk where her legal papers were stacked. She opened the drawer, pulled out the folder containing her will, and set it on the table. The pen felt heavy in her hand, but as she picked it up, she realized it was the weight of a decision she had finally made for herself. The next few days passed in a blur of cold mornings and quiet afternoons. Elaine stayed busy, as she always did, but now each task felt different. There was no longer the sense of drudgery in her movements, no longer the obligation to hold it all together for others. The house, still fragrant with the lingering smell of Thanksgiving, felt like a quiet fortress, a sanctuary where she could finally breathe on her own terms. The phone call from Vanessa had come the next morning, confirming everything was in place. Elaine was ready. The drive felt longer than usual, as though every mile was taking her farther from the woman she had been and closer to the woman she was about to become. The woman who didn't apologize for her decisions. The woman who didn't make excuses. The woman who knew her worth. When she arrived, she walked into the building with a slow, deliberate pace. As she stepped into Vanessa's office, the scent of fresh paper and polished wood filled the air. Elaine smiled faintly at the familiar, comforting atmosphere of legal papers and quiet negotiation. Vanessa was already waiting, a file in front of her, the edges of it neatly aligned. Her glasses sat low on her nose as she scanned through the documents, her fingers moving across the papers with precision. Elaine's heart beat steadily in her chest as she sat across from Vanessa, folding her hands on the table in front of her. For a moment, she simply looked at the file. She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. But there was still a weight to the decision she had made. A quiet responsibility that came with her choice. "You're sure?" Vanessa asked, her voice soft but firm. "This is it. This will be the final version. Once you sign it, Michael will have no claim on anything. Not your house. Not your finances. Not your assets." Elaine nodded without hesitation. "I'm sure. I've thought about it long enough. Michael doesn't get to manipulate me anymore. He doesn't get to tear me down with his silence or his entitlement." Vanessa nodded, her eyes kind but professional. She slid the papers across the table to Elaine, the weight of them symbolic, as if she were handing over the power of a new life. "This is the version we discussed. It's airtight. There's a behavioral disqualification clause, so if Michael tries to contest it, his behavior will automatically void his claim." Elaine's fingers lingered on the edge of the papers. There was a part of her that wanted to look at Michael's name one more time, to see it, to make sure this was really happening. She lifted the first page and her eyes immediately found his name, Michael Thompson, her son. But not anymore. The moment she signed her name at the bottom of the document, she would remove him. Not just from her will, but from her life, from her thoughts, from her future. She would no longer be bound by the chains of obligation. Elaine picked up the pen. It was heavier than she expected, but the weight felt right. She didn't flinch, didn't second-guess herself. This was the moment. With one steady motion, she signed her name, Elaine Thompson, at the bottom of the will, the letters forming a clean, sharp line across the page. The signature felt final. No more backing down, no more appeasing. The contract of her life was sealed in ink, and nothing could change that now. Vanessa took the paper from her, glancing over the signature before looking back up at Elaine. "This will be filed with the court by the end of the day. We'll also prepare a digital affidavit for your protection. It'll be stored securely in case you ever need it." Elaine sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. The weight on her shoulders had lifted. She had done it. She had taken control of her future, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. "I'm done," Elaine said quietly, more to herself than to Vanessa. "Done pretending I need him. Done letting him decide who I am. I don't owe him anything." Vanessa's eyes softened, but there was pride there too. "You're not just done, Elaine. You're free. This is your life, your legacy, and now it's yours to shape." Elaine smiled, though it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of relief, of clarity. The golden light filtered through the leaves, casting long shadows across the lawn. She thought about Michael, about the years they had spent together and about how she had let him control so much of her life. For the first time, she understood what it meant to take back her power. To not just say no, but to act on it. She had let him take so much, and now she was the one who was taking back what was hers. Elaine glanced over at the framed photo of her family on the mantelpiece. There was Michael, only a few years younger, sitting at the table with her husband Harold. A time when things were simpler, when she had believed family was forever. But that was before everything had changed. Before Michael had started to treat her as nothing more than a source of money and favor. Before he had slapped her and she realized once and for all that his version of love wasn't love at all. Now Elaine knew better. The truth was simple. Family wasn't defined by blood. It wasn't about who shared your last name or who shared your DNA. Family was about respect, about care, about showing up when it mattered, not just when it was convenient. And Michael had stopped doing that long ago. As the night settled in, Elaine poured herself a glass of wine. She didn't drink often, but tonight felt different. Tonight was a celebration, not of what had been lost, but of what had been regained. For the first time in years, she felt like she was her own person again. She didn't need Michael's approval. She didn't need anyone's approval. Elaine Thompson was finally free. Elaine had always been a woman who preferred peace to conflict, but what she had realized over the past few days was that sometimes peace wasn't something you waited for. Sometimes it was something you created, sometimes with a gentle hand and sometimes with the sharp edge of a pen. A week had passed since she'd signed the final revisions to her will. The legal documents had been filed and a new life was beginning to take shape around her. But the emotional aftermath, the echoes of what she had done, still lingered in the quiet corners of her house. She hadn't heard from Michael. Not a phone call, not a text. No apology, no explanation, nothing. And somehow that stung more than the slap had. Elaine wasn't naive. She knew Michael would be angry. She knew he might even try to make her feel guilty for what she had done. That was how he had always operated, through guilt, manipulation, and silent threats. But this time there was no room for that. The walls she had built were strong now, and there was nothing he could say or do that would break them down. The silence in the house felt different now. The air was still, yes, but there was a new kind of stillness to it. Peace. Peace that came with taking back control. Peace that came with setting boundaries and refusing to let anyone cross them, no matter who they were. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Elaine's heart fluttered. She wasn't expecting anyone, but there was always that faint hope that it might be Michael, that maybe, just maybe, he would come to his senses. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Michael. It was Lydia, her neighbor and best friend. Lydia had been a constant presence in Elaine's life, always there when things got tough, always offering support without judgment. Elaine's shoulders relaxed as she saw Lydia standing there with a warm smile and a small basket of muffins. "Thought you might need these," Lydia said, her eyes scanning Elaine's face, still noticing the faint bruise along her cheekbone. "You okay?" Elaine stepped aside and let Lydia in. "I'm better than okay," she said, offering her a cup of coffee. "I'm free." Lydia nodded, setting the basket down on the counter. She knew what Elaine meant. She had seen the transformation in her friend over the past week. The strength in Elaine's eyes was unmistakable now. The woman who had always been the caretaker, the listener, the one who put everyone else first, was gone. In her place was someone who had finally chosen herself. "I'm proud of you," Lydia said softly. "You've done what most people couldn't. You set yourself free." Elaine smiled, the weight of those words settling into her chest like a warm embrace. "It feels strange. I thought I would feel guilty or like I'd made a mistake, but I don't. I just feel lighter." Lydia took a sip of her coffee, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Has he reached out? Michael?" Elaine's expression hardened slightly, but only for a moment. "No, and I don't expect him to. He's angry. He's probably plotting. But it doesn't matter anymore." Lydia nodded again, understanding that Elaine wasn't just talking about Michael's reaction. She was talking about all the years she had spent letting others dictate her worth, her happiness, her peace. "You did what you had to do," Lydia said, her voice full of conviction. "And I'm here for you. Whatever comes next." Elaine appreciated the comfort, but part of her knew she had to face this on her own. She had made her decision, and now she was going to stand by it. But it didn't hurt to know she wasn't alone in this fight. Elaine didn't just feel different, she was different. She took walks in the mornings, spent time with her plants, and finally began reading the books that had sat on her shelf, waiting for her attention. She had no obligations to anyone but herself. No excuses. No apologies. One afternoon the phone rang. Elaine stared at the caller ID, her heart momentarily skipping a beat when she saw Michael's name flash across the screen. For a moment she almost didn't pick up. She didn't want to hear what he had to say. She didn't want to hear the excuses, the guilt trip tactics, the "I'm sorry, but she knew she had to answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady. "Mom." Michael's voice came through the phone, strained and tired. "We need to talk." Elaine's pulse quickened, but she didn't let it show. She wasn't going to let him control her, not anymore. "What is it, Michael?" There was a pause on the other end, and when he spoke again, it wasn't with the anger she had expected. Instead, there was something else. Resignation. "I just want to know why. Why did you do this? Why did you take everything away from me?" Elaine took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Michael, I didn't take anything from you. I simply took back what was mine. For the first time in years, I'm choosing myself." He scoffed. "So that's it, huh? You're done with me? You're cutting me out of your life?" Elaine closed her eyes, the tightness in her chest fading as she let go of the anger that had been building inside her. You're not cut out of my life, Michael. You made that decision when you decided to disrespect me, to take advantage of me. I did this because I had to. For my own peace. For my own dignity. There was silence on the other end, and when Michael finally spoke, his voice was softer. I don't know what happened to us, Mom. I don't know when I stopped caring, when I became this person. His words were fragile, like they were breaking as they left his mouth. Elaine felt a pang in her heart. It wasn't the apology she had been hoping for, but it was something real. I don't know either, she said quietly. But what I do know is that I can't wait for you to change anymore. I can't keep sacrificing myself for someone who doesn't respect me. I've spent my life doing that. The conversation ended soon after. Michael didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. But for the first time, Elaine felt like she had said everything she needed to say. There were no more unsaid words hanging in the air. The air was clear. She had done the right thing. The silence that filled her house was no longer oppressive. It was just silence. Quiet. Her quiet. The doorbell rang once again, but this time, when Elaine opened the door, she wasn't surprised to see Lydia standing there with a knowing smile. "Thought you might need company," she said, her eyes glinting with warmth. Elaine stepped aside, opening the door wide. "I think I do." And for the first time in years, as she closed the door behind them, Elaine didn't feel alone. She felt free. Weeks passed since Elaine had made the difficult decision to change her will, to sever ties with Michael, and to take back control of her life. The house, once filled with a tension of unspoken expectations and emotional manipulation, now hummed with a quiet sense of peace. The Thanksgiving dinner that had been the catalyst for her transformation seemed like a distant memory, as though it belonged to someone else. Elaine woke up each morning with a clarity that she hadn't known in years. The days felt fuller, not because of the things she had to do, but because they were hers to fill however she chose. The mornings were spent sipping tea by the window, watching the world wake up outside. The evenings, once consumed by guilt and unresolved tension, were now her time to unwind, time to reconnect with herself. It wasn't just her house that had changed. She had changed. The bruises from Michael's slap had faded, but the impact of the event had left an indelible mark on her soul. It wasn't the slap that had hurt her. It was the realization that for too long she had allowed herself to be unseen, unnoticed, and taken for granted. Now she saw herself clearly. For the first time in years, she felt whole. Lydia, who had been her confidant through years of both joy and hardship, became her anchor during this period of change. They shared long walks through the park, talking about everything and nothing, about old memories, new dreams, and the kind of future Elaine was finally ready to build for herself. One afternoon as they walked along the park's tree-lined path, Lydia turned to Elaine with a soft smile. "You're different, you know," she said, her voice gentle as if afraid to disturb the moment. Elaine chuckled softly, looking at her friend. "I hope so. I think I'm finally starting to understand who I really am." Lydia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You've always been strong, Elaine. But this is something else. You've taken back your power, and that's something most people never get to do. You should be proud of yourself." Elaine's heart warmed at the words, but a part of her still felt a lingering doubt. She had made the decision to change her will, to sever ties with her son, but the reality of it still weighed on her. She knew it was the right decision, but that didn't make it easy. "I don't know if proud is the right word," Elaine admitted, her voice soft. "I'm still processing everything. I keep wondering if I did the right thing. If there was another way, if I could have fixed it. Michael was my son, Lydia. I spent my whole life loving him. How do you just let go of that?" Lydia placed a hand on Elaine's arm, stopping her in her tracks. "You didn't let go of him, Elaine. You just stopped allowing him to hurt you. That's not the same thing. You didn't abandon him. You just stopped accepting his abuse. You gave him the space to figure things out on his own, and now you've given yourself the space to heal." Elaine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Lydia's words settle deep inside her. She had spent so many years trying to make things right for Michael, trying to fix what had broken between them, that she had forgotten about the cracks that had started to form in her own life. Now, for the first time, she was seeing her own needs, her own worth. She opened the envelope with a sense of calm anticipation, knowing it was the final legal document. The estate transfer was official now. Michael had been removed from the will, and Elaine was no longer legally bound to him. As she read through the document, Elaine's hand trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. It was the finality of it all, the closure. Vanessa's note was brief, but it made Elaine pause. "I know this has been a hard decision, but I want you to know that what you've done will not only protect you, but it will also set an example for others. You have the right to protect yourself, and your story has already helped more women than you know. You will never have to go back to what was." Elaine placed the letter down, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. She had done what most people only dreamed of doing. She had taken back control. Elaine spent her time on her own terms now, with no obligation to anyone but herself. She began volunteering at a local charity that supported survivors of elder abuse and neglect. It felt good to be giving again, but this time she gave with boundaries. She no longer felt the weight of others' expectations pressing down on her. She could choose who to help and when. At the charity, she met Dana, a woman who worked there as a volunteer coordinator. Dana was in her late 40s with an air of quiet strength that immediately reminded Elaine of her younger self. She had raised her own children, worked hard her entire life, and had experienced her own struggles with family. Over time, Elaine and Dana became close, sharing stories of their lives and their common desire to help others. One day, Dana sat down with Elaine over coffee after their shift. "You've got a good heart, Elaine," Dana said, her voice steady and warm. "But I can see the walls you've built too. I've been there. I get it." Elaine smiled softly. She didn't know if she was ready for another relationship, not yet. But Dana's words felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. She didn't have to give up on others, she realized. She just had to give without losing herself in the process. She missed the boy he used to be, the one who had sat at her kitchen table, laughing over pancakes. She missed the feeling of having a family, a sense of connection. But those moments were fleeting. Each time the pang of loneliness hit, she reminded herself that this was what it took to reclaim her life. She had to let go of the person Michael had become in order to protect the person she was becoming. And in the silence of her house, in the quiet comfort of her new life, she knew she had done the right thing. As the weeks continued, Elaine found herself standing in front of the mirror one morning, examining her reflection. The bruise from Michael's slap had long since healed, but it was the scar that remained that was important. Not the physical one, but the emotional scar, the one that had once made her feel small, insignificant, and powerless. Now that scar was a reminder of her strength. She was no longer afraid to face herself, to face her past. Elaine smiled at her reflection. A small, quiet smile. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," she whispered to herself. She was no longer waiting for approval. She was no longer playing the victim. She was finally fully Elaine. And for the first time in her life, she was living for herself. Elaine had spent a lifetime investing in relationships that drained her, but now she was investing in herself. The shifts she had made in her life were more than just legal decisions. They were personal revolutions. Every morning as the light streamed through the kitchen window, she felt lighter, more centered. It wasn't about the absence of Michael. It was about the presence of herself. She had given up trying to make people love her and finally understood the power of loving herself unconditionally. After signing the final documents and watching her relationship with Michael fade into a distant chapter, Elaine found herself drawn to the work she had always enjoyed, helping others. But this time, she was doing it on her own terms. She had started volunteering at a local elder care center, one that focused on helping those who had been neglected or taken advantage of in their later years. The work was fulfilling, but it was also empowering. The women and men she met there, many of them survivors of emotional abuse, of being ignored or silenced by their families, spoke to a part of her that had never quite healed. They reminded her of her own experiences, of the years spent holding up her family while silently crumbling under the weight of it all. She wasn't alone. There were others who had stood in her shoes, who understood the silent battles, and who, like her, were beginning to rise up piece by piece. Dana was a woman with a heart of gold, but had been through her own struggles with family dynamics, much like Elaine. Dana had always been the one who took care of everyone else, and like Elaine, she had come to a point in her life where she needed to take care of herself first. One quiet afternoon, as the two of them sat in the office of the care center after a particularly challenging day, Dana turned to Elaine with a soft smile. "You know," Dana said, folding her hands on the desk, "I used to think that giving everything to everyone else was what made me a good person. But what I've learned, what I'm still learning, is that the best thing I can give is my own peace. The best thing I can give is my own boundaries." Elaine nodded, her heart swelling at Dana's words. She had heard those same words in her own mind, but hearing them from someone else felt like a confirmation. She had done the right thing. She had built the walls, set the boundaries, and protected her peace. "Thank you," Elaine said softly. "I think you've just reminded me of something I needed to hear. I'm still learning too. But every day I feel stronger." Dana smiled knowingly, the kind of smile that only someone who had been through the same journey could give. "You're not alone in that. And I'm proud of you. You're doing things now that most people would never even consider. You're taking back your life." Elaine looked down at her hands, her mind briefly drifting back to the days when she was a mother first, a woman second. She remembered those years when her identity was so tied up in her family's needs that she had lost sight of who she was. But that was no longer her reality, and for the first time she didn't mourn the change. She welcomed it. Elaine was no longer just the quiet volunteer. She was an active leader, an advocate, and someone whose voice was being heard. Every time she spoke, it felt like her words carried more weight. She wasn't just a mother or a widow anymore. She was Elaine Thompson, a woman with a mission. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was redefining it. Vanessa's voice was calm, but there was a certain urgency in her tone. "Elaine," Vanessa said, "I need to talk to you about something. It's about Michael." Elaine's stomach tightened. Despite everything, despite the decision she had made to cut him out of her life, part of her had expected this moment to come. Part of her had known Michael wouldn't take his removal from the will quietly. "I'm listening," Elaine said, her voice steady. Vanessa hesitated for a moment before continuing. He's filed a legal petition to contest the will. He claims that you were emotionally unstable when you made the decision. He's trying to argue that you were under duress when you removed him. Elaine closed her eyes, the familiar weight of anger and frustration settling in her chest. She had expected something like this, but hearing the words out loud still felt like a punch to the gut. You know he's doing this because he feels entitled, Vanessa continued. He's always felt that way. He thinks he has a right to your money, your house, your life. But what he doesn't understand is that this is your decision. He's trying to manipulate the system, but we'll fight back. You've done everything right. You've documented everything. Elaine exhaled slowly, her grip tightening on the phone. The walls she had built were under attack, but she wasn't about to let them crumble now. Not when she had worked so hard to rebuild her life, to set boundaries and protect her peace. I'm not backing down, Elaine said, her voice firm, her resolve unwavering. This is my decision. He won't win. Vanessa paused for a moment, then said, I'll prepare for the legal battle. But Elaine, remember, this isn't just about money. This is about him trying to control you, and you've already taken control of your life. Elaine smiled faintly, feeling the truth of Vanessa's words settle in her bones. This wasn't just about a legal battle. This was about reclaiming her power. This was about showing Michael and the world that she would no longer let anyone take from her what she had earned. The emotional weight of the battle was heavy, but she wasn't alone. She had Lydia, Dana, and even the women she met at the elder care center who stood with her, supporting her, cheering her on. Elaine knew this fight wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she was fighting on her own terms. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a warrior, armed with her own voice, her own choices, and her own strength. Dinner tomorrow. Just the two of us. I think we both deserve a win. Elaine smiled, her heart light. She had already won. Elaine sat at her kitchen table, the familiar smell of coffee filling the room, but it didn't bring her the same comfort it once had. The quiet was different now. It was heavy. Every day felt like a battle, not just against Michael's legal actions, but against the lingering doubts she sometimes felt about her decision. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she knew without looking who it was. Vanessa Green, her lawyer, had been her rock through this process, guiding her through the complexities of disinheritance and legal disputes, but the past few weeks had worn both of them down. Elaine had made her decision, but the legal battle was just beginning. She picked up the phone and pressed it to her ear. Elaine, Vanessa's voice came through clear and steady as usual. We need to prepare. Michael's petition to contest the will has been officially filed, and his attorney is already trying to discredit your state of mind when you made the changes. They'll argue emotional instability. Elaine rubbed her temple, her fingers brushing against the fading bruise on her cheek. Michael's claim that she was unstable felt like another slap in the face, another attempt to control her, to paint her as the irrational one. But Elaine wasn't the woman she had been when Michael had first made his accusations years ago. She was different now. "I'm not backing down, Vanessa," Elaine said firmly, her voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove I made this decision with a clear mind." Vanessa paused for a moment, then responded with a quiet assurance, "I know you will. We'll build a strong case. But I need you to stay focused, Elaine. This is going to be emotionally taxing. You'll need to be prepared for how Michael and his attorney will try to twist things." Elaine exhaled, leaning back in her chair. "I'm prepared. I've been prepared for this. I just want it to be over. I want to move on." Vanessa's tone softened. "You've already won, Elaine." Michael's actions show his true colors. He's trying to manipulate you again, but this time you're standing your ground. Elaine nodded, although Vanessa couldn't see her. "I know, but I can't shake the feeling that this battle isn't just about money. It's about him needing control over me. He's never stopped seeing me as someone to manipulate." "Let's focus on that," Vanessa said. "I'm going to gather all the evidence we need. We'll show the court that you were in full control of your decision and that Michael is trying to rewrite the story to suit his needs. And remember, you have the emotional support you need. I'm here, Lydia is here, and Dana. Don't try to go through this alone." Elaine nodded again, this time more assured. She had made the choice to be strong, to not let Michael's actions define her anymore, and now it was time to see that choice through. Elaine found herself sitting with Vanessa at her law office, going over the finer details of the case. Each document is reviewed, every affidavit they filed was another piece of the puzzle, another building block in the wall Elaine had constructed to protect herself. But the emotional toll was undeniable. Each time Elaine looked at the papers that Michael had filed, each time she heard his name, it was like a jolt of betrayal. He had been her son. She had spent her life raising him, loving him, and sacrificing for him. Now he was the one trying to tear apart the life she had built for herself. But there was no room for self-pity. Elaine had learned that the hard way. Every day she reminded herself that this wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. It was about boundaries. Michael had crossed the line, and now it was time to make sure there was no going back. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she opened it, she found Lydia standing on the doorstep, holding a warm casserole dish in her hands. I thought you could use a little comfort food, Lydia said with a soft smile. She could see the exhaustion in Elaine's eyes, but there was a quiet strength there too. How's everything going? Elaine sighed, stepping aside to let Lydia in. I'm not going to lie, it's tough. The legal battle is draining. Michael's attorney is trying to twist everything, make it sound like I was emotionally unstable when I made the decision. Lydia shook her head, her expression sympathetic but resolute. Elaine, I don't think you're unstable. You've been nothing but clear about your intentions. And don't let anyone make you feel like you have to justify yourself. He's the one who's out of line. Elaine smiled faintly. I just keep thinking if I could have done things differently. But then I remember. I couldn't. I've spent so much time trying to make him happy, trying to fix things that weren't my responsibility. Lydia placed the casserole dish on the kitchen counter and looked at her friend. Elaine, you've been through more than most people could ever handle. And look at you now. You're standing up for yourself. You're fighting for your peace. Elaine's gaze softened. You're right. I've spent too many years waiting for someone else to take care of me. Now it's my turn. Lydia smiled, her eyes filled with pride. I think you've done more than just take care of yourself. You've taken control. That's what matters. Elaine didn't respond immediately. Instead, she moved over to the window, looking out at the bright afternoon sky. For the first time in a long time, she felt like the future was wide open. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was hers to walk. There were days when the weight of it all seemed unbearable. She had to give testimony, she had to defend her decision, and every moment spent in court felt like another battle. But with each passing day she grew stronger. She felt the quiet power of her decisions, the clarity of her choices. One afternoon, after a particularly draining legal meeting, Vanessa called Elaine into her office. We've got good news, Vanessa said, her tone more upbeat than it had been in weeks. Michael's petition to contest the will has been dismissed. The court has ruled in your favor. There will be no further challenges. Elaine felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she didn't let herself smile just yet. She had worked for this moment, but it felt so surreal. You did it, Vanessa said, smiling. You stood your ground, and now Michael has no legal claim to anything. Elaine's breath caught in her throat. It's really over? Vanessa nodded. It's over? And you're free. Elaine stood still for a moment, processing the words. The sense of finality was overwhelming. She had spent so many years living in the shadow of her son's expectations, carrying the weight of his demands. But now, for the first time, the weight was gone. She wasn't a mother being controlled. She wasn't a woman trapped by guilt. She was Elaine, a woman who had fought for her peace and had won. The day Elaine received the final ruling in her legal battle with Michael was a turning point, not just in her relationship with him, but in her life. She stood outside the courthouse, feeling the sun on her face for the first time in weeks, the weight of the past few months suddenly lifting. The heavy burden she had carried for so long was finally gone. There was nothing left to prove. No more guilt, no more second-guessing herself. She didn't go home immediately. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the streets of her neighborhood, passing familiar houses, old landmarks, and roads that had once been part of her everyday routine. Everything seemed different now. Everything felt more spacious. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was truly living. She parked near the lake, stepping out of the car and taking in the peaceful surroundings. The trees were just starting to change color, the reds and oranges a stark contrast to the gray cloud of the past she'd been living under. It was time to take back every piece of herself she had lost. Elaine sat by the water, her legs crossed, watching as a few ducks glided past. She thought about everything she had been through, the years of feeling invisible, the years spent trying to make Michael happy, and how it had all come to a head that Thanksgiving. She hadn't cried in months, but now, as she sat alone by the water, the tears came. Not from sadness, but from relief. It was like a dam inside her had burst, allowing everything to spill out, years of frustration, confusion, and hurt. When the tears stopped, she felt lighter, clearer. She had done the hard work. She had walked away from the past, and now she was ready for the future. They hadn't talked in depth about the case since the verdict had been handed down, but Elaine knew this conversation was coming. Lydia looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "So, what now, Elaine? What's next for you?" Elaine smiled faintly, stirring her coffee slowly. "I think it's time I start living for myself. Really living, not just surviving. I spent so many years taking care of everyone else, trying to make sure everyone else was happy. It's time I put myself first." Lydia nodded. "That sounds like the Elaine I've always known. Strong, steady, and ready to take on the world." Elaine felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. She was no longer defined by the title of mother or wife. Those were parts of her, yes, but they no longer defined who she was. She had reclaimed herself, and now she was ready to build a new version of her life. "I've been thinking," Elaine continued, her voice a little more animated. "I want to start something. Maybe a community outreach program for older women. Something that focuses on empowerment, support. There are so many women out there who feel invisible, just like I did. I want to help them see that they have the power to reclaim their lives too." Lydia's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Elaine, that's brilliant. You've lived it. You know what they're going through. You could make such an impact." Elaine felt a rush of purpose, a new kind of fire that had been dormant for too long. "It's time to give back. I've had my fair share of struggles, but now I want to help others find their strength." She began meeting with local organizations, planning how she could make her vision a reality. She reached out to other women she knew who had faced similar challenges, women who had been silenced, ignored, and overlooked. One by one, they rallied behind her idea, ready to create something powerful, something that would give older women a platform to stand on. By the end of the month, Elaine had organized her first community meeting. The room was small, but the energy was palpable. There were women of all ages, some elderly, some middle-aged, all eager to share their stories, to learn from one another, to build a support system that wasn't based on blood or obligation, but on respect and empowerment. Elaine stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. But this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. She was about to take the first step into a new life, one where she could be the change she had always hoped for. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I'm so glad you're here. I know that for many of us we've been told that we don't matter, that we've passed our prime. But I'm here to tell you we have a lot to give. We have power, we have stories, and together we are going to change the narrative." The room erupted into applause. Elaine felt the weight of her journey, all the years of suffering, melt away. She wasn't just helping these women find their voices, she was finding her own, too. Women came from all corners of the city to join her meetings, to share their experiences and to support one another. Elaine wasn't just providing them with a platform, she was showing them how to take their lives back, how to stop waiting for permission, how to stop apologizing, how to create a future that was theirs to shape. Michael never reached out again. Elaine had no illusions that he would change or that he would ever understand what she had done. But she no longer needed his approval. She didn't need anyone's approval. She had done what was necessary. She had chosen herself. "You're making a real difference, Elaine," Dana said with a warm smile. "You've turned your pain into something powerful, something that will last." Elaine looked at Dana, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you or Lydia or all the amazing women I've met along the way. You've all shown me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about finding a way to heal, to keep moving forward no matter what." Dana's smile deepened, and Elaine felt the full weight of her new life settle into her bones. She had built something beautiful, something meaningful. And it wasn't just for the women she helped, it was for her, too. Her life had changed. She had changed, and the woman she had become was no longer defined by the past. As she paused beside the rosemary bush, she breathed in the scent of the fresh herbs. Her heart was calm now, her mind at peace. "I am enough," she whispered to the quiet evening. And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. Elaine sat in her new office, a modest but cozy space above a local cafe where she had started her community outreach initiative. The walls were decorated with photographs from the group's first few months, women laughing, talking, sharing their stories, and the framed quotes on the walls now served as constant reminders of the journey she'd taken. Each quote spoke of empowerment, resilience, and strength. They were the words she had needed to hear years ago, the words that had, for so long, been missing from her life. Now she lived by them. The weight of the past, of Michael's betrayal, of the years spent trying to fix what was broken had dissipated. The woman she had become was one who could look at the mirror with pride. This was her work. This was her legacy. The phone on her desk rang and Elaine smiled as she recognized the number. It was Lydia. "Hi there," Elaine answered cheerfully, settling back into her chair. "What's up?" Lydia's voice was warm, but there was an undertone of excitement. "Elaine, I have some good news. The outreach program is being recognized. They want to give you an award, a formal recognition for your work with the community. It's going to be featured in the city's annual service awards." Elaine blinked in surprise. "What? Really?" Lydia laughed softly. "Yes, really. They've been following your work. They want to highlight the difference you've made in these women's lives. I know it's not about awards for you, but I think you deserve it." Elaine leaned forward in her chair, her mind racing. She hadn't thought about recognition in this way. She had been so focused on the work itself, on making a difference, that she had never expected any accolades. But as she thought about it, she realized something. This recognition wasn't just about her. It was about everything she had fought for, the women who were finding their voices, the families who were healing, the countless lives that were being changed because she had chosen to stand up for herself. "Well, I didn't do this alone," Elaine said quietly. "There are so many women who have helped me along the way, Lydia, Dana, and all the amazing women who show up every week. I'm just one piece of this puzzle." "Of course," Lydia said. "But you're the piece that put it all together. You're the one who made it happen. You're the one who's been showing up every day, creating space for people to find themselves. I think you deserve this moment." Elaine sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of Lydia's words settle in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to really feel proud of what she had accomplished. She wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was a leader. "I'll be there," Elaine said, a smile tugging at her lips. "But don't expect me to give a big speech. I'm not one for the spotlight." Lydia chuckled. "I'm sure you'll manage just fine." Elaine arrived with Lydia by her side, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. The air was filled with chatter, the soft murmur of people excited to be in the room. When her name was called, Elaine felt a rush of nerves she hadn't expected. She stood up slowly, taking a deep breath, and made her way to the front of the room. The applause that greeted her felt almost surreal, but there was a warmth in it, a deep respect that washed over her. The mayor stood beside the podium, holding a plaque. Elaine Thompson, the mayor began, is a woman who has dedicated her life to creating a space for others to thrive. She has shown us what it means to empower those who feel invisible, to give strength to those who need it most. Her work with women in the community has impacted lives in ways that cannot be measured. Elaine, we thank you for your tireless dedication to making our city a better place. Elaine took the plaque from the mayor, feeling the weight of it in her hands. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight. She wasn't used to the praise. But as she stood there holding the award, she realized that this moment wasn't just about her. It was about all the women who had supported her, all the women who had trusted her, and all the women who had found strength through her initiative. When she spoke, her voice was steady but filled with gratitude. I didn't do this alone, Elaine began. I've had the support of so many incredible people, including my dear friend Lydia, and the women who have shared their stories, their struggles, and their strength with me. This is not just my work. This is the work of a community, and it's because of all of you that we are making a difference. I'm proud of what we've built, and I look forward to what's to come. The applause that followed felt like a wave of warmth. Elaine felt it, but it wasn't about the recognition. It was about the work. It was about the lives she had touched and the lives that were still to be touched. As she walked back to her seat, Lydia gave her a wink and a thumbs up. Elaine smiled and sat down beside her, feeling a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. She had walked through fire. She had faced down her past, her fears, and her doubts. And now she was here, in this moment, being recognized for her courage, her compassion, and her unyielding commitment to making the world a better place. She had not only helped them reclaim their power, but they had helped her reclaim hers. Together, they were creating something lasting, a movement that was built on respect, on boundaries, on the understanding that no one was ever too old to change, too broken to heal. Michael's attempts to disrupt Elaine's life had faded into the background. He had tried to tear her down, but what he hadn't realized was that he had only made her stronger. Elaine had built something that no one could take from her, not with legal papers, not with anger, and certainly not with guilt. She had built a legacy based on respect and empowerment. She had rebuilt herself, brick by brick, and now the walls she had constructed were not a prison but a sanctuary. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't perfect, life never was, but it was hers. It was real. And that was enough. Elaine thought back to the first Thanksgiving, the one where everything had come crashing down. She had felt so lost, so small. But now here she was, strong, independent, and surrounded by people who truly cared for her. Her phone buzzed on the table and she glanced at it. It was a message from Dana. "How are you doing? Just wanted to remind you, you're amazing." Elaine smiled softly and typed back, "Thanks. I'm better than I've ever been." As she sent the message, she looked at the framed photo on the mantel, the one from years ago, her family, with Michael as a young boy. A part of her would always love the child he had been. But the woman she was now wasn't defined by the past. She had rewritten her story. She had chosen herself. And that was more than enough. Elaine sat back in her chair, the weight of everything she had overcome settling around her like a warm blanket. The journey had been long and painful, but she had arrived at a place of peace, strength, and clarity. She had faced her past, stood up for herself, and built a future that was truly hers. The scars from the past would always be a part of her, but they no longer defined her. She had rewritten her story, and now she was living it. Her phone buzzed once more, but this time Elaine didn't feel the need to check it immediately. She knew that, no matter what, she had come to a place where she could truly breathe again. The world felt lighter, her heart fuller, and the road ahead seemed endless with possibilities. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And just like Elaine's story, there are so many untold stories waiting to be heard. If you've enjoyed this journey of transformation, strength, and resilience, be sure to subscribe to her Untold Diary, where we share the stories of real people, real change, and the power to take control of your life. Don't miss out on new stories that can inspire, motivate, and show you that no matter the struggle, there's always hope and strength to be found. Hit the bell icon for updates and join us on this journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Because every untold story deserves to be shared. Thank you for being here. Stay strong, stay empowered.